24 bits or 96 kHz. So whenever I make a video about bit depths, 16-bit, 24-bit, 32-bit, there will be people in the comments saying, "You forgot about sampling rate." But just as there seems to be a demand for videos on bit depth, and believe me, there is a demand, I have the evidence in my YouTube statistics, I think there may be, just maybe, a demand for videos on sampling rate. Here's a question. Did you know before you clicked that you would be interested in this video about sampling rate? Or does YouTube's algorithm know you better than you know yourself? I suspect the latter. Anyway, I'm here, you're here, so, as YouTubers say, let's get into it. 44.1 kHz, one of my favourite frequencies. I do have favourite frequencies, and there's going to be a video on them all soon. 44.1 kHz may not technically be an odd number, but it seems odd, and why not something nicer like 40 kHz or 50? Not too far away and definitely nice and round. Commenters, someone sent me a comment on nice round numbers in the dozenal system, just for fun. Where 44.1 kHz comes from is that digital audio used to be recorded on video recorders, professionally the U-matic format. The audio went into a processor that digitized it and made it look like a video signal, so the recorder was fooled. Standard definition video recorders in the NTSC format, which was used in the land of Sony, run at a frame rate of 30 frames per second and 490 active lines per frame. Put 3 samples in each line and we get 3 times 490 times 30 equals 44,100. OK, there are complications around this, and please comment your favourite complication in the comments. So we're still living with this now. Digital workstation software presents 44.1 as being one of the 2 sampling rates you're most likely to choose. So what's the other sampling rate you're likely to choose? 48 kHz. And if you're watching this, you already know. Where 48 kHz comes from, well, the story, as I heard it way back in the 1980s, was that broadcasters were already using 32 kHz. And it was easier to convert 48 to 32 than 44.1 to 32, at least back in the olden days. It says similarly on Wikipedia, but can we trust Wikipedia for this information? This would be the Wikipedia that says that 48 kHz does offer slightly more headroom for audio mixing, which allows for more flexibility, especially on higher frequencies. Which, as we know, is a complete load of bollocks. Anyway, we have this choice, 44.1 or 48. There really isn't any reason not to choose 48 unless you're absolutely sure that the only outlet for your work will be CD. 48 kHz is in fact designated as high-resolution audio, high-res, by the RIAA and CEA. We all want res, don't we? And higher res clearly is better res. Res, it could almost have been the Oxford English Dictionary's word of the year. Now, let's get into some science. Don't click away, it's easy enough. Theory has it, and practice confirms, that to sample up to any particular frequency, the sampling rate has to be at least twice that frequency. Otherwise, we get aliasing, which I will probably cover in a future video, but rest assured, it sounds bad. Very bad. But also, on digital to analog conversion, we have to filter out the sampling frequency. So there has to be a low-pass filter that lets everything below 20 kHz get through and nothing at all at 44.1 or 48 kHz, or at least close to these requirements. This is going to be a pretty steep filter. And that steepness does have implications for perceived audio quality. This isn't some audiophile's hallucination, it's a real-world issue. I say that, at my age I'm sure I can't hear it, but we accept that the range of human hearing goes up to 20 kHz, so we would prefer in an ideal world for that 20 kHz to be pure in frequency, pure in amplitude, pure in phase. Here's a question. Clearly, a filter suitable for 44.1 kHz is going to need a steeper slope than for 48 kHz. But does your digital to analog converter know about this? Or does it use the same filter for both, thus producing suboptimal sound at 48 kHz? Then, of course, there's oversampling in the digital to analog converter, but that's at the listener's end. Wouldn't you want your digital bits to be the best for all listeners? 48 wins. The next step after 48 kHz is usually 96 kHz. Yes, I know 88.2. But why? Can't we just set ourselves free from compact disc? So I'll ignore this unless there's some clamouring in the comments for me to cover it in future. What we get at 96 kHz is the ability to capture much higher frequencies, much higher than anyone can hear, even Phil. Now, there will be a debate in audio engineering circles about whether you should be capturing, storing and outputting frequencies that no one will hear. Asking for trouble might be an appropriate phrase. But definitely the higher sampling rate allows for a shallower filter. This is a good thing. Now, the but. Doesn't there always have to be a but? 96 kHz is, unfortunately, less practical for recording. If you're recording an orchestra straight to stereo, then fine, go for 96. If you're recording an orchestra in multitrack, so you can make your balance decisions later, then fine. Well, probably fine. I've never gone over 16 tracks myself at 96 kHz, so I don't know what practical limits there may be with up-to-date technology. One thing I do know, however, is that 96 kHz isn't so good for production, like when a producer, bedroom producer even, records loads of synth tracks into his or her digital audio workstation software, then applies multiple plugins to each track. The inevitable result is that the computer's processor has to work harder, and there comes a point where it just can't keep up. The TLDR of this is that the higher the sampling rate, the fewer tracks and less processing you can use. There are workarounds, but you'll probably just prefer the convenience of being able to do what you want without your computer running out of steam. So this means, as a producer, you'll probably record in 44.1 or 48. Probably, almost certainly. Then when you mix and master, your work will remain at the same sampling rate that you recorded. Now, here's a funny thing. You could record in 16 bits. You wouldn't want to, but you could. And then when you bounce to stereo, you can bounce to 24 bits, and you'll get the benefit from that. This is because some, or most, or all of your faders will be lower than 0 dB, thus plunging your 16-bit tracks down into 24-bit territory. The digital audio workstation software can, of course, handle this. So you could, and I don't know whether anyone other than crazy people do this, you could record at 96 kHz in 16 bits. So twice the sampling rate is pushing through twice the number of bits, but you're saving a third of the number of bits by only using 16. You know, I'm not going to try this. I've got work to do. We're up to 96 kHz. What lies beyond? Well, obviously 192 kHz. And of course we'll be recording fewer tracks with less processing. Still okay for classical music, or probably any form of acoustic music that doesn't need much processing. Or even electronic music if you do your processing on the way in, or print your software instruments to audio tracks. My view is that although 48 kHz is enough for most people, and it's enough for me, but as I often find myself saying, it's only just good enough. For me personally, I doubt if I'll ever actually hear and perceive the benefits of 96 kHz, but I want it, and if I knew I wouldn't need many tracks for my project, then I'd use it. But 192 kHz, surely this is madness. Well, not really. If I say that 48 kHz is good enough for me, but I prefer 96 to really be sure, what about an audiophile? I'm a mere enthusiast. I accept that there may be some people who genuinely can hear the difference between 48 and 96. So, by the same logic, they should want 192 if they can get it. As for the next step, which reach you for my calculator now, is 384 kHz. Come on now, it's getting silly. But there's one more sampling rate I need to cover. 2,822.4 kHz. That's 2.8 megahertz. Wow, we've skipped a few beyond 348. Yes, I'm sure that you know this is direct stream digital. DSD, as used in the SACD format, Super Audio CD. It isn't overkill, it's just a different way of encoding audio digitally, pulse density modulation, as opposed to the pulse code modulation we normally use. And the amazingly high sampling rate is compensated for by an amazingly low bit depth. 1 bit. Yes, compared to the 16 bits of CD or 24 bits of professional audio and high-quality downloads, SACD only uses 1 bit. 1, 1, or 0, on or off. I really don't know what audiophiles make of this, but if I were an audiophile, I'd surely be wondering whether something wasn't quite right. But the numbers don't lie. Dynamic range of 120 decibels and a frequency response up to 100 kHz, of which about 50 kHz is possible in practice. And what comes out of your player may have little or nothing above 20 kHz. And to that point, a respected classical music engineer of my acquaintance said to me in as close a quote as I can remember, above 20 kHz, it's just noise. But 20 kHz, that's fine. So there we have it. The perfect sampling rate is 96 kHz, according to me. But until perfection is attainable, I'll be sticking with 44.1 or 48. What about you? See you soon.
Hi, I'm Phil, audiophile. I have a system that runs at 88.2 kHz in my walk-in wardrobe. I buy 2 copies of each CD and run one through an 11.3 microsecond delay, thus producing a data stream that has twice the resolution. I listen when I'm getting ready to go out in my double denim tuxedo.